And here on Inside the NBA, we are joined now by the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver. Adam, before we get into a possible return to play for the first time since March 11th or so, a lot of your players have been front and center in recent days. Tell me your thoughts as you put all of this into perspective and you see how many of your players have taken an active role.
Well, let me begin by saying I've been listening to you guys, for the last half hour or so, and a lot of the points have struck home with me. One of them is, I'd say to Kenny, Charles, and Shaq, I think I've known you all of you, for some of you close to 30 years, others almost as long, and you can't walk in another man's shoes. And I'd say, you've all made the point about listening, and I think this is a wake-up call for the country. Because we had, for example, a community conversation at the NBA yesterday with almost 1,000 people. And many of my colleagues, African-American colleagues, were telling stories that people I work with every day, and people I thought I knew what was going on in their lives, and people telling stories about having guns pulled on them, when they were innocently going about doing their business, or the way they feel they were discriminated against in a certain situation. And I think you guys hit the core of it. I mean, there are no doubt law enforcement issues, but ultimately this is about race and race in America. And I think what also has struck me is that we are such a unique institution, one that all of you, of course, are part of, that I think ultimately may be in a position to have more of an impact on this issue than almost any other organization in the world. I mean, when you think about among the players, coaches, former players like you guys, who are including our ownership now, within that group you have some of the most well-known people of color in the entire world. And I think, I've had this conversation with Michelle Roberts just today, who of course runs our Players Association, who is also African-American, and saying, let's collectively put our heads together. And I mean, Michelle was the first to say, yeah, but this just can't be more of the same. This isn't about another joint statement from the league and its players. This is a moment in time. And and part of my hesitation has been, I don't have any answers. I mean, I think as Shaq said, and all of you said, this is about listening at this moment. But so I don't think it's about coming up with something tomorrow, but fairly quickly, I think we need to come together and think about ways that this institution can have an impact on our greater society. And as I said, we had a Board of Governors meeting, our owners meeting today to talk about restarting the season, but we ended up spending the first hour just talking about these issues and why people got involved in the NBA and how we, again, can uniquely potentially have an impact on these issues. And I just lastly say I've been incredibly proud of our organization. And again, we use that expression, the NBA family, but I mean it broadly, just listening to you guys over the last half hour. And, whether it's retired players like Steven Jackson or, current players who are speaking out on these issues. And I think of course, I've been listening to the back and forth just now. And I think even on these issues, it's never going to be the case we're all going to agree. But I also think one of the values of the NBA has always been tolerance. So I also think we have to be willing to listen to each other and even accept that we're not always going to agree on what the solutions are. And occasionally people are going to unintentionally say something that has a different meaning to other people. And that's one of the things we're all learning now as well.
Yeah. As your Board of Governors meeting continued today, you did have approval of a plan that you see as getting the NBA back to play on July 31st. Take me through the crux of this and what still needs to be done, Adam, before we can say, not only is this the plan, this is what's going to happen.
let me begin by saying it seems somewhat small, to be talking about return to playing basketball in the context of what you guys are talking about. But I mean, that we have been working. I mean, I think when we all talked shortly after we shut down the season, and of course we've always been looking for whether or not there is an appropriate and safe way in which we can resume basketball, and knowing that we're going to be living with this virus for a while. And I think just as other industries, other businesses are looking to find their way, I think we've been exploring together with the players whether there, in essence, can be a new normal here. And so what we've come up with now is playing without fans for the time being at a single site, and that would be in Orlando, Florida, at Disney World of Sports Complex. We had extensive discussions, again, with our teams and the players about what the format should be, and ultimately we concluded the fairest way to do this would be to take the 16 teams that, as of March 11th, would have qualified 8 in the West, 8 in the East for the playoffs, but then to take what we're calling the 6 other bubble teams, and that is, and it turns out it's 5 teams in the West and 1 team in the East, and those are the teams that were within 6 games of the 8th seed. And then we would begin playing by having what we're calling seeding games, and that is games to determine who ultimately should be the top 8 in the West and the top 8 in the East. And it will also give the players an opportunity after training camp to play not quite regular season games, but meaningful games before they go right into the playoffs. And then once the playoffs start, and this was a point made by Michael Jordan, whose team, the Charlotte Hornets, are not one of the 22 teams, but he's clearly the most respected voice in the room when it comes to basketball. He felt it was very important that after we established the 16 teams, we not be gimmicky, because there were a lot of proposals on the table to do unique tournaments and pool play like you see in international competition. And we took many of those proposals very seriously. But I think ultimately, and I agreed with Michael, that there's so much chaos in the world right now. I mean, even before the racial unrest we're experiencing now, that let's come as close to normal as we can. And as close to normal as we can is top 8 in the West, top 8 in the East, playing 4 rounds of 7 games. So then that's what we intend to do, and our goal is to crown a champion.
Well, Adam, let me ask you this question about fairness. There's a couple questions I need to ask you. Nurkic, Zach Collins for Portland, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving for the New Jersey Nets. It wouldn't be fair if those guys came on either one of those teams, because if the season had ended, those players probably would not have been back, or maybe been back. Are they going to be able to play in the rest of the season? Because I'm not sure that's fair if you're playing a New Jersey team that's going to get Kyrie and Kevin Durant back, or a Portland team, if they get Nurkic and Zach Collins back, that changes the whole dynamic. Is that fair, or are you going to allow it?
We're going to allow it, and I'd only say, Charles, and this has been the back and forth with our teams, there's so much here that's not fair, and I think we were choosing among multiple bad alternatives, given the pandemic we're dealing with. And I think that many of the teams that weren't able to resume play, those 8 teams that are not included, thought it was unfair. And I think there were also some of the teams that are already, in essence, had mathematically made the playoffs, that it's unfair to give some of these 6 teams an opportunity to play in. And I think ultimately, to the extent a team has a healthy roster and those players are able to come back, they are eligible to play.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.